Thanks so much to Growth for hosting us. My name is Tahira Abdullah, and I'm joined by my partner at Highlands Venture Partners, Jacqueline Bennett. And we're here to talk about cannabis, investing, and whatever else we think is interesting. As investors, advisors, and operators, both in and out of the cannabis industry, we're going to pose 20-ish, rapid-ish fire questions to each other about the industry and beyond, and see what amazingly insightful things come out of our mouths. So before we jump in, Jacqueline, can you introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from?
Hello, Tahira.
Hi.
Good morning from where I'm sitting. So Jacqueline Bennett, I originate from Perth, Australia, which is actually where I'm currently sitting unusually before I return to New York in about 3 weeks, which is where my permanent residence is, well, somewhat permanent. I started my career in merchant banking in Sydney for a company called Babcock & Brown. I spent 3 years in Silicon Valley helping to build a e-com travel company, which was eventually acquired by TripAdvisor. Spent 6 years on Wall Street, training me for some tough operating and sort of business environment. In the last couple of years, focused on disruptive commerce, so helping early stage consumer-facing companies grow their businesses, raise capital, acquire companies. And that really led me into the cannabis industry where I've been for the last couple of years. So I'm as Tara mentioned, co-founder and partner at Highlands Venture Partners, our firm. I'm also a council member at Nation Swell, so doing some important work to elevate a lot of organizations and efforts more in the sort of nonprofit realm of the US. And on the board of advisors for Nova Capital. And then on a personal note, I would say I'm generally a massive advocate for women and helping them as they face sort of unique challenges with their own growth. So Tahira, tell me, I'd love to hear about you.
Well, I am a Pakistani-American girl who hails from the great state of Ohio. I've spent most of my adult life in New York City, where I am currently. But I've been in the cannabis industry since 2014, working across the industry from investing to brand building and a lot of things in between. Prior to that, I was in finance. I started at Ernst & Young, worked at a hedge fund for quite some time, and then actually went over to the nonprofit side and worked at a community development fund. I discovered cannabis coming out of business school in 2014. As Jacqueline mentioned, we currently work together at Highlands. I also have a consulting firm called T3 Ventures. I serve on a few company boards like Akerna, Sarah's Acquisition Corp, and Supret. And I'm also on the advisory board of the Last Prisoner Project, which is a nonprofit dedicated to bringing restorative justice to the cannabis industry.
Very good. All right, are you ready to jump into 20 questions?
Let's do it.
Unpack a little bit more about you. So question number 1, what attracted you to the cannabis industry?
So I was attracted to the ability to help people by combining private sector with social mission. I mean, I came from the finance sector, but I also spent time at nonprofits, and I wanted to figure out how do you combine all of this. Some people know the story, Jacqueline does, but for the audience, I was really introduced to cannabis because when I was in business school, my grandfather was suffering from stage 4 lung cancer. And like many people do, when somebody in their life is starting to suffer from an illness like that, you look for alternative treatments. And we, as a family, kept coming across cannabis, which was pretty surprising and just, I think, eye-opening in that it was something that clearly had helped people for so long, but was still very much lurking in the shadows. And so I just seeing how it had helped people, and also learning a lot about the racial injustices, I should say, and how the war on drugs was really a war on Black and brown people. All of that made my head explode, and I knew that I had to be a part of it and do something about it. Jacqueline, what about you? What attracted you to the industry?
So my story goes, it was while I was still at JP Morgan in 2018 and was actually working on a sell-side mandate, and we were struggling to get a good return for the seller. So to be creative, we started targeting the Canadian cannabis companies as potential buyers as they were looking to get a footprint in the US. So to me, that was this incredible opportunity to learn about the industry. It was my first exposure to really seeing what was going on with the backdrop of all the explosion in the public market cap, which was pretty insane in 2018. So being the perpetual enthusiast for all things new, I went to my boss at the time suggesting that this is a good opportunity for us to develop a thesis at the firm and really start getting involved in the industry. But being, JP Morgan obviously highly regulated, it was too early for us. So it wasn't time. So I think for me, when I'm told no to something, that's further motivation to get involved. So after that, I feel like all roads were leading to cannabis, met some interesting people in the industry and took the leap of faith, left Wall Street and joined the industry early 2019 and haven't looked back because I don't have time to.
Describe what the industry and the plant mean to you.
Sure. So I'd say on the industry side, the legalization of cannabis it's created a great and unique opportunity for groundbreaking discoveries in health and wellness and technology. And I think there's an element of clean slate. It's almost like a clean canvas to really build a new ecosystem where we can take learnings from other industries and apply them to cannabis and build something that's sort of sustainable and all the trimmings of where we would improve our previous work and how other industries have evolved. So to me, that's incredibly exciting. On the plant specifically, the understanding that the female reproductive system has the second largest number of endocannabinoid receptors, second to the brain, and also knowing that or recognizing that there's been significant underdevelopment and lack of innovation in products available to women as it pertains to health conditions and wellness broadly. So marrying the two, there's some really exciting ability to introduce new products, innovate products that are scientifically validated to bring to market and enhance access for women globally by exploiting some of the compounds in the cannabis plant. So that to me is a huge opportunity and obviously close to the heart being a woman. Tahira, tell me, what does the industry and the plant mean to you?
I think the industry and I guess the plant too, I mean, echoing a lot of what you said, but to me, it's about empathy. I think the plant has been a source of care for so many people for so long. I think the industry has the opportunity to do that. I don't think we're fully there yet. But I hope that the industry as a whole catches up. Like, I think cannabis broadly is about empathy and healing. And I think that if we look at it through that lens, there are so many things that we can do better and to enhance the industry and make it into what I think a lot of people would like it to be. That's what I think.
Agree with that. We all need a little healing right now.
I think so.
I would say.
I think so.
So third question, what achievement by the industry broadly are you most proud of?
I think that it's the increasing acknowledgement that the industry must be open to people of color and women. And, I don't think that we are where we should be by any means, but I think, I think we're very, very far from it. But there has been an increasing focus on that in the recent past. I think it's a long time coming. I think it should have started there, but I'm proud of the fact that people are actually putting it front and center and making it a requirement in some areas or putting in the real effort, which is work too, to make sure that we make the appropriate room and that everybody around the table doesn't look the same. And I think we have a very long way to go, but I'm proud of the fact that it's at least daily conversation and I think more meaningful than it used to be. What achievement are you most proud of?
I think mine echoes the similar theme, specific to New York State as a resident there. I think in 2019, when adult usage was not legalized, and the reason behind it being that the social equity policy was not where it should be, to me is a good indication that we're starting to focus on the right things and making sure that there's sort of equitable participation in an industry that really deserves it and should be not a precedent, but there's an opportunity to get things more right as it pertains to broad participation.
are 3 words that describe the current state of the industry?
3 words. I would go with innovative, collaborative, and early. And you? 3 words? Hit me with 3 words.
Volatile, exciting, and disruptive.
Why, question number 5, why do you choose to work in what is often described as the Wild West?
I think cannabis is an industry that it converges all of the different industries that are out there. And I truly believe that it touches on just about everything. Investing, innovation, social mission, emerging market, medicine, racial justice. I think that these are all coming together in this industry. And to me, I just can't think of any other industry that has so many different touch points and that intersects with so many different types of people around the world. And that's really, really exciting to me. And for someone like me who has a very short attention span at times.
I've never noticed.
Never once. It's good. Remember you said that. It keeps me very engaged, always excited, and I think always learning, which is probably the most interesting aspect to me. There's nothing has the opportunity to really get stale, and I don't think it will for decades because it's that new and interesting. What about you? Why do you work in the Wild West?
For me, I'm a stimulation junkie. So in cannabis, there's definitely no shortage of surprises, and it's very exciting. There's thrills and spills every day. That's one part, and there's also I'm committed to the cause, so there's a lot of work ahead of us and really important work. The plant's incredibly important from a biological perspective, and I'm excited to be part of building what I consider a critical emerging market. It's exciting, it's motivating, and I'm always eager to start my day, which is the way I want to live life.
What part of your life prior to working in cannabis do you think best prepared you for it?
So I mentioned in my sort of intro that I worked at Babcock & Brown, which is the first job, my first job as I started my career back in 2005 through to 2008. And the firm was kind of a poster child for a very rapid success story. After going public in 2004, we quickly became an international multi-billion-dollar company. And then the financial crisis hit and we were eliminated, essentially. So we went from this great success story to a very quick fall from grace. And it was a very quick lesson for me at an early stage of my career that business is vulnerable and there's always perpetual change, and to not get too comfortable. So be open to growing, to listening, to learning, and to really keep your focus on building what you're building, but always have eyes and ears open and have a wide lens to avoid that sort of the risk of being surprised and it negatively impacting your business. What in your prior life best prepared you for the industry?
I think it was probably a combination of my finance experience and my nonprofit experience, which they both touched on different elements. There was surprisingly, there is actually overlap, but I think having this balance of your head and your heart is really important for the cannabis industry. And also there are some things that you can follow some kind of a plan and most things you can't. And so being able to think about how to be creative and learn from other industries, but then also pull that in. I felt like I did a lot of that before, but this industry has taken it to another level, but it's been a welcome adventure.
Ain't that the truth? Question number 7. What is the most common question you are asked by people looking to learn about the industry?
How do I get experience? What about you?
The most common question, particularly while I've been in Australia, is, so is this thing real?
Fair question.
Yes. Real. It's happening. There's no turning back.
This?
Yeah, we have cannabis. We're a real company, actually.
Yeah.
A real company. A real country. And a company.
As an investor in the industry, what are you most excited about? Let's do it in like the short term, the medium term, and the long term.
So I would say, as an investor, obviously focused on making returns and choosing good teams and businesses to put money behind. On the short term, I think there's a lot of interesting and exciting new single state operators or emerging single state operators and multi-state operators. And the question is, if you're a single state operator, how are you going to penetrate the market? How much growth is ahead? And if you're a multi-state operator, you're facing complexities as it pertains to borders. What's your strategy to manage those? And, have you really, how do you define your growth strategy, and is it plausible? So I think short term is really the classic investor hat. I want to find good teams, good businesses, and it can be across verticals, because there's just so much white space ahead that there's a lot to build and a lot of growth ahead. And then I think the medium term, the thing that I think about obsessively is how traditional industry are strategizing around cannabis. So I think we know that when federal legalization occurs, and depending on what happens on November 3rd, that may or may not be accelerated, but it's going to happen at some stage in some capacity. And so how is Big Pharma thinking about cannabis? How is CPG thinking about cannabis? And what are their strategies internally? Will Coca-Cola one day have a CBD infused beverage? Do they want to acquire one? And if you're a management team working with a cannabis company, then you need to really understand where you fit in that federally legal market to make sure that you're still relevant when these big players come in, and that you don't become obsolete. So that's how I think about the medium term. And then the long term for me is around where my passions lie, and that's on the we touched on earlier. It's really the health and wellness side. There's, because of the complexities in the industry, it's really forcing creativity amongst teams and all participation. Whether you're advising the FDA or whether you're growing plants, there's just constant movement towards innovation enhancement. And I think that there's really a lot of excitement around disruptive bio in the biotech vertical. So when some of the companies that we've been talking to lately and some putting money behind, there's sort of exposed the lack of innovation around what we're putting into our bodies, what we're putting on our bodies. And so that to me is the exciting opportunity to introduce new products into market and better products into market that actually interact with our cell tissues and our organs the way that they can do. So for me, the long term, where I expect to be spending more of my time is on the biotech side. Just in a nutshell, there you go. And
tiny little things. Well, I'm looking forward to you learning all the biotech stuff and then telling me what it means in terms.
It requires a university a diploma.
Well, you go get that, and I'll be ready to do some deals.
All right. In the meantime, why don't you tell me what excites you as an investor, short, medium, long term?
I think in the short term, it's the acknowledgement, I think more recently, that cannabis is an essential business. I think that's been a huge shift in the mindset for a lot of people, or even like the direction of where cannabis is going, where there were areas of uncertainty. And don't get me wrong, there's like still a ton of uncertainty in a lot of different areas, but that is a stamp of approval that I don't know if everyone was expecting. And now that it's there, I think it changes the game a little bit. I think it's a huge win for the industry. So that's what I'm excited about as an investor in the short term, because it's sort of leveling the playing field a little bit for the industry in order to be, considered legit like other industries. In the medium term, I think you touched on a lot of it, the evolution into a more mature industry with elements of legalization, with the opening of capital markets in some areas. Like I was just in a conversation the other day that it was a lot about equity versus debt, and the fact that there is debt actually in the industry that's different than even 18 months ago, and the accessibility of it. I think it's still changing, but there's a larger population in the U.S. that lives in areas where cannabis is legal than not. So we're trending in the right direction, and I think in the long term, it's going to be growth into a fully legal and widely available industry that has also righted the wrongs of prohibition and the war on drugs. I mean, that's the long-term goal, and where, as an investor, I think it's critical that we get to. There has to be a balance, and what we've seen more recently, I think, is the imbalance, and we're trying to reset some of that.
Very important and a unique opportunity as well, which
small little task.
Yeah,
we got this.
Okay, moving on, switching gears slightly. So question 9, actually, as an entrepreneur in the industry and outside the industry, what is the best advice you would offer to other entrepreneurs looking to start a cannabis business?
I think you have to talk to as many people as possible to make sure that your business makes sense and continues to make sense. I think it's a little bit different if you're starting a vertical operation or a cultivation. But outside of that, I think there's so much change. And even with those businesses, understanding what fits where and what market and how that looks going forward. But I've met so many business founders who have been really hell-bent on the product that they're building or the company that they're building, and are solving a problem that made sense when they were thinking about it, but not when it actually got to market. And the market changes so drastically. I mean, this is an overdrive right now. And I don't think that that's going to change. That sometimes when businesses actually get to market, it's not the right fit anymore. And so I think you have to make sure you are staying tuned in to what is happening in the market and making sure that your business is evolving with what's happening. What about you?
I would say do your homework. Very classic advice. And I think understand not the sector that you're going into, really understand the history of it. So what sort of happened before you entered it, what's happening now, and what is expected to happen in the future. And you got to position and make sure you're establishing a business model and building a business model that has flexibility. Because I would say I've never seen an industry that has so much change happening every single day and in so many different ways. So you really have to be bold enough to make pivots in your business and your business strategy so that you're not you don't become obsolete when something around you that's out of your control changes. And that that happens across industries, but I think particularly in cannabis, when there's so many things changing, whether it's at the macro level, the micro level, you really need to have a few pillars of your business so you can shift gears as and when necessary, and don't be too proud to do that. Is something I would certainly recommend in the cannabis industry. The other thing is just to think big. How is your company going to scale? Want to be on the international stage, build an effective investor base that's going to help you grow through different stages of the company. And then I think number one for any business is really build a great team around you, and one that with individuals who share the mission and the vision, and that definitely helps it become a fun venture. That's what we're here for. Fun. What do you consider to be the greatest threat to the industry? The greatest threat, I take it to the micro level for the threat, and I think we have entered a new era in cannabis. And what worries me at times is some operators, both operators and investors, who are potentially not experienced enough for the stage that the industry has now entered. So I think that can be, you look at some of the last 6 months, 6 to 12 months, cannabis markets impacted, and obviously COVID coming in. There's sophistication is required for continued build and to sort of survive these really, really volatile times. So I would say appropriate experience needs to be at the appropriate tables.
I think it's a threat. I mean, I think that the industry as we know it has been able to develop because of these constraints, and a lot of the competitive edge that's been developed is because of these constraints, and a lot of that goes away as each new layer of legalization happens. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for legalization, but it does change the game, and we have to think about the impact that it has at, you mentioned the micro level, kind of going all the way to the top. It's going to look very different when that happens, and I'm excited for it. I'm also scared for it.
So let's take it offshore. Where do you see opportunity in international markets? And tell me sort of why.
So outside of North America, I mean, I guess outside of the US, really, most international markets have been focused more on pharmaceutical, the medicinal track. And I think there's a lot to learn from a lot of the structures and how those markets have developed, the way that they're focusing on research. And I think that's really interesting and is going to have global implications on how you utilize cannabis in the more pharmaceutical sense as opposed to the adult use sense. US is unique with so many different types of markets in it, but most other countries are not developing like that. What about you? Where do you see opportunity?
I'm a little bit Israel obsessed, so I would think there's a lot of really groundbreaking innovation and technology coming out of some of the universities. Hebrew University of Jerusalem is one particular organization that I've been spending or just had a lot of exposure to. So really cutting edge, groundbreaking discoveries there in biotechnology, and the multitude of R&D labs that are on the edge of innovation and deploying some of these solutions into market. To me, that's where I think knowing and understanding and having a lens into what innovation is happening within Israel across particularly medical cannabis and on the technology side it's important to have awareness of what's coming out of that country, because they move quick.
What's been the greatest surprise about the cannabis industry?
The greatest surprise is the people. Absolutely, the people. I think some people, I should say, not all people. You're number one. It's really, with the awareness of how important the industry is and how much work there is to do, and there's a need for collaboration, and I'm very warmed by how much a lot of people work together, and there's some very, very impressive people who we sort of bring into what we call our think tank, and I am excited to keep finding more people like that and pushing this thing forward. Tahira, what has been the greatest surprise for you?
I think the acceptance. I mean, I started in the space in 2014 when nobody really talked about cannabis in the way they do today. You didn't see it in the news. It wasn't in a magazine. There weren't blogs about it, or at least not ones that you didn't have to dig for. So it's the acceptance. It went from being pretty taboo to something that everybody and their mothers, mine included, talk about.
I think some of my friends in Australia have been getting almost a little annoyed by how much of the conversation has been about cannabis since I returned, because everybody wants to talk about it, which is great. There's some real good awareness and adoption happening. So with the greatest surprise comes the worst surprise. What's been your least favorite surprise in the industry?
I think it's actually the acceptance. Also, not that original, but here's why. I think it got too hot too fast. Too many people flooded in who didn't know what they were doing or why they were doing it, and the market started to implode. I think we started to see that last year. And we've seen this in other industries, and we've had lessons laid out for us. You talked about 2008. I mean, there were indicators leading up to that. I think we allowed it to grow and then crater a little too quickly. And so I think that has been challenging, but we're learning from it too. So it just happened a lot faster than I thought it would. What about you? What's the worst surprise?
The worst surprise is when I thought I was leaving Wall Street, I actually wasn't. So I think there's in environments where there's a lot of economics at stake, I think certain behaviors present themselves, and that's probably one area that I've been a little bit disappointed. There's, some folks kind of in it for themselves, and again, touching on a theme throughout this conversation is that cannabis is such an important emerging market for various reasons, particularly on the medicinal social equity side, and I think it should be a team sport.
What accomplishment in the industry are you most proud of?
Personally, that I can say the word cannabinoid 3 times without screwing it up.
Let's hear it.
Cannabinoid, cannabinoid, cannabinoid.
All right,
it's not easy. You may think it may look easy, but it's not easy. What accomplishment of yours in your long history in this industry are you most proud of?
I'm most proud of building one of the first brands in the space. And back in the day when pre-packaged cannabis was a very novel concept, and also working on the first U.S. listed cannabis SPAC that was a MTech and is now successfully de-SPACed and is a Kurna.
Just small achievements. You pioneer, you.
Oh yes. Look at all the things I've done.
No, very, very impressive. I'm delighted to have you as someone who attracted me into the industry, that is for sure. Actually, you know what? Let's switch gears. So we've got 6 questions left, and I think the last few questions we can probably hit pretty quickly. So I'm going to ask you 6 questions in rapid fire, to which I expect a rapid fire response.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay. So 15. What myth about the cannabis industry do you think needs to be busted?
It's filled with people who only want to make money.
What's the best kept secret in the industry that you're willing to reveal to us today?
It's still very early. We have a long way to go. A lot of people use baseball innings talk. I don't understand that sport. So I think we're still in the first couple of innings, and there's just so many more to go.
If you could make a documentary about cannabis, what would it be about?
I wouldn't make a documentary. I'd make a comedy, because the cast of characters in this space is like none I've ever seen.
Clever. I like it. If you weren't working in cannabis, what would you be doing?
Stand-up comedian.
I'm glad you said it, because I was going to suggest it. You funny woman. What are you reading right now?
Kafka on the Shore by Murakami. And also The Power of Habit, which you recommended to me, which I am reading.
And for the grand finale, the question we're all most interested in hearing the answer to, what's your go-to karaoke song?
More money, more problems. All right, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
What myth about the cannabis industry do you think needs to be busted?
That if you're in the industry, you can handle your pot.
We're going to have a long conversation about that one. What's the best kept secret in the industry that you're willing to reveal?
That women actually run the show.
If you could make a documentary about cannabis, what would it be about?
You, Tahira Matilda. The perils and the triumphs.
All right, I'm gonna have to do some more interesting stuff. So there's actually something to talk about. If you weren't working in cannabis, what would you be doing?
Writing a novel.
Speaking of novels, what are you reading right now?
Women in Leadership, which is a recently released book. It's a collaboration between Julia Gillard, who's the first female prime minister in Australia, and Dr. Agonji Awila, who's the Nigerian Minister of Finance. So they profile 8 different women in political leadership roles, and it's pretty fascinating.
Very cool. And last but not least, what's your go-to karaoke song?
Pat Benatar, Hit Me With Your Best Shot. Don't ask me to sing it. All right, well, that's 20 questions done and dusted for 2020. Thank you, Tahira. It is always a delight interacting with you.
Jacqueline, thank you, Growth.
Thank you, Growth.